Hello, and welcome. Tonight, we turn our attention inward, beneath our feet, into places where the air grows still and the light fades to black. The surface world is familiar, brightened by the cycle of day and night, shaped by seasons, and measured by the steady ticking of human clocks. But below the surface, deep in caverns and passageways, another kind of time seems to take hold. It is slower, quieter, and altogether different. This episode is called "What if time moves differently underground?" This is not a suggestion of supernatural forces, but an invitation to consider how time itself is experienced and measured in the depths of the earth, in caves, mines, and deep laboratories. Human perception shifts. Without the sun or stars, our sense of passing hours can slip. Our bodies follow rhythms guided by light, temperature, and sound, but in darkness, those cues vanish. Researchers who have lived underground for weeks at a time often emerge convinced that fewer days have passed than in reality. Their sleep cycles drift, their internal clocks reset, and their sense of continuity stretches and bends. It is not just human experience that suggests time moves differently in the underground world. Geology adds another dimension to the thought. In the depths, processes unfold so slowly that human lifespans barely register. Stalactites grow at the rate of a few millimeters per century. Drip by drip, mineral by mineral, layers of stone compress over millions of years. Fossils form silently as once living matter is replaced, molecule by molecule, by mineral. To stand underground is to stand within the living archive of Earth's deep time. And yet, the underground also compresses history. Layers of sediment, preserved in darkness, hold events in a kind of suspended state. Ash from ancient eruptions lies undisturbed in caves. Bones of extinct animals remain intact in caverns where no scavenger has reached. There, moments of the past are protected from wind, water, and light, waiting silently to be uncovered. To descend underground is to enter a space where the present overlaps with the deep past, where a single glance might take in both yesterday and millions of years ago. Consider the human fascination with caves. Across cultures and continents, they have been sites of ritual, shelter, and imagination. Some of the earliest known artworks, handprints and painted animals, adorn cave walls in France, Spain, Indonesia, and beyond. To those early artists, caves may have felt timeless, places where generations could leave their marks to endure long after their bodies had returned to dust. Even now, standing before such ancient paintings, we sense the collapse of distance. Thousands of years fall away, and we feel the presence of those who stood with flickering torches, mixing pigments, and pressing palms to stone. But time underground is not only about the vast and the ancient, it is also about perception. In the absence of light, our bodies lose track of days. Circadian rhythms drift toward a natural cycle closer to 25 hours than 24. Sleep patterns extend. Waking and resting blur. In studies, some individuals have lived in caves for weeks and emerged thinking only a handful of days had passed. The underground, in this way, bends not physical time, but lived time. It creates an altered experience of existence, stretching and softening the edges of hours and days. For animals, too, time shifts in the underground world. Species adapted to caves, fish without eyes, insects without pigment, bats tuned to cycles of darkness, follow rhythms independent of sunlight. Their lives unfold in perpetual twilight. For them, the underground is not a disruption, but a home, a world where time has long been divorced from the sun's rising and setting. Studying these creatures offers a glimpse into life freed from the rhythms of the surface, where adaptation means letting go of ordinary markers of time. There is also a psychological effect. In the silence of caverns, where echoes stretch and footsteps feel both immediate and distant, the sense of self can change. Without clocks, calendars, or daylight, thought itself slows, moments feel heavier. Each sound is magnified. Some describe the experience as meditative, others as disorienting. Either way, the underground holds a mirror to our inner rhythms, revealing how dependent we are on the cues of the surface world. The scientific world has taken advantage of this environment to explore not only geology, but human biology and physics itself. Deep underground laboratories, shielded by rock, study particles that pass unnoticed on the surface. These facilities depend on the fact that mountains and stone block background radiation, creating spaces where the rarest events can be observed. In these places, time is measured not by human perception, but by the passage of elusive particles, fleeting interactions that suggest an invisible cosmos. Thus, underground, two extremes of time coexist. On one side, the almost unimaginable slowness of geology, stalactites growing drip by drip, fossils forming atom by atom, mountains pressing against one another over millions of years. On the other, the fleeting immediacy of physics, particles flashing into existence and vanishing in less than a second, too fast for human senses to register. The underground collapses these scales, housing both the most ancient and the most instantaneous, reminding us that time is not singular but layered. To explore caves is to wander through this multiplicity. A fossil bone embedded in rocks, creatures long extinct. A stream carving new channels reminds us that the underground is still alive, still changing. The air itself holds a sense of suspension, of moments elongated. It is no wonder that myths often describe the underground as an entrance to other realms. In a sense, it is. Not because of supernatural portals, but because the experience of time itself shifts there. We often imagine history as a line, a steady march from past to present. Underground, it feels more like a circle or a spiral, where eras overlap, where the past endures in the present, and where the present stretches into something slower, deeper. In the depths, the ticking of clocks loses authority. Time belongs to stone, to drip, to silence. And so, as we begin this journey into the question of whether time moves differently underground, let us carry with us both humility and curiosity. We know that seconds and minutes pass at the same pace beneath the earth as they do above it. Yet we also know that perception, geology, biology, and memory transform those seconds into something entirely different. We step into caves and mines, into laboratories and ancient shelters, not to escape time, but to feel it differently. This is where our story begins. The air in a cave is not the same air we breathe above ground. It moves more slowly, drifts more gently, often with no hint of a breeze at all. In those still layers of atmosphere, particles settle without disruption. Dust from centuries ago can lie untouched on a ledge. Pollen grains can remain sealed in crystal formations, and moisture lingers so long it changes the very chemistry of stone. What we encounter is not simply a chamber of rock. It is an archive, written in silence. Drip by drip, mineral-rich water leaves its record. Stalactites lengthen, stalagmites rise to meet them, and the slow clock of geology ticks in increments, so small the human eye could never measure them. Some of these cave features grow less than a centimeter every 100 years. Entire civilizations can rise and fall, while the tip of a stalactite shifts barely a breath. And so, stepping into such places, we are reminded of how brief our lives are, and how vast the patience of Earth itself must be. Light is scarce in these underground worlds, and when it is removed entirely, another kind of time begins. Biologists who study cave ecosystems speak of species that have abandoned sight altogether, creatures pale and translucent, whose bodies are adapted to an existence where darkness is eternal. For them, the concept of day and night has no meaning. Their rhythms align instead with chemical changes in water, or with the near imperceptible flow of nutrients washed in from faraway surfaces. In observing them, we are confronted with a possibility. Time is not one thing. It is not fixed. It is experienced differently depending on where one lives and how one survives. Humans, too, have felt this transformation. In experiments where individuals spend weeks or months in deep caves, isolated from clocks, calendars, and sunlight, their perception of time drifts. Many report that days feel shorter than they truly are. Their internal sense of when to sleep or wake loses its tether to the rising and setting of the sun. Some have emerged believing only a few days had passed, when in reality entire months had unfolded. Others felt they had endured years, though only weeks had gone by. Such accounts tell us that underground, the mind itself begins to measure existence differently. Without the constant cue of light, the body rewrites its own sense of duration. Geologists remind us that underground time also carries the weight of memory. Rocks that lie hidden beneath the surface can preserve chemical signatures of events so ancient they defy imagination. Within layers of limestone, scientists detect variations in isotopes that hint at the climate of oceans millions of years gone. In pockets of salt, trapped bubbles of air whisper of atmospheres no longer present. To wander deep underground is to walk inside the planet's diary, though the language it uses is mineral, patient, and unhurried. Even myths and stories have carried echoes of this truth. Many cultures describe caves as gateways, thresholds where human time meets something eternal. Ancient people would leave offerings in cavern mouths, or paint walls with symbols that endured long after their own voices fell silent. These acts may not have been only ritual, they may have been recognition that here, in the stillness beneath the earth, messages could last beyond the span of generations. While wood decays and cloth turns to dust, a mark upon stone inside a cave might remain for tens of thousands of years. We find such examples in the caves of southern Europe, where handprints, animal figures, and enigmatic signs remain as vivid today as when they were made over 30,000 years ago. Standing before them, we are connected not just to the artists, but to the strange durability of the underground. Above ground, wind and rain erase. Below ground, silence keeps. It is no wonder that early humans chose these spaces for their most lasting expressions. They were not only places of shelter, but of timelessness. There is also the weight of pressure, an invisible reminder of how deeply one has descended. Each step downward adds more layers of rock above, compressing, holding, and intensifying the environment. To modern explorers, this is a logistical challenge, but to the imagination, it feels as though one is passing into a slower world, where forces have compacted not only stone, but the very essence of time itself. In that density, moments feel heavier, the air tastes older. The heart beats against the recognition that one is surrounded by matter forged long before human existence began. Scientists studying subterranean water flows note another subtle lesson. When water moves underground, it does not rush as it does in rivers above. It seeps, filters, and winds its way through fractures at a pace so gentle, it may take centuries for a droplet to travel a few kilometers. This water is often called fossil water because it is ancient, stored since eras when the climate was entirely different. Drinking from such a source is, in a sense, tasting a moment of the planet's past. In that moment, the illusion of a steady present dissolves. We are reminded that what we call now contains many hidden layers of then. There is also something unsettling about the absence of change underground. While the surface roars with storms, seasons, and the endless cycle of day and night, the cavern stays constant. Enter it in winter or summer, and the air remains nearly the same cool temperature. Enter it after centuries, and little will have altered beyond the slow growth of formations. This constancy, for the human mind, is alien. It resists the markers by which we measure life's progress. To remain in such an environment is to feel oneself slipping out of sync with ordinary time. And yet, this slipping is not chaos. It is a kind of alignment with the older pace of the earth. Perhaps this is why cave dwellers in myth were often portrayed as sages or visionaries. Removed from the surface world's rhythms, they were said to perceive truths hidden from others. Whether real or symbolic, the lesson remains the same. Beneath our feet lies a dimension where time bends differently, and those who linger there cannot help but feel its influence. The deeper we imagine ourselves descending, the more profound the silence becomes. It is not merely an absence of sound, but a fullness of quiet, the kind that presses against the ears and makes the heart's rhythm seem loud. In such quiet, even a drip of water or the shifting of one's breath becomes a vast event. Time is revealed not through hours or minutes, but through the intervals between drops, the slow spread of moisture across stone, the gradual cooling of the air against skin. Scientists have long studied how this silence can alter the human mind. In chambers designed to eliminate external noise, subjects often report that their thoughts expand into the emptiness, filling it with impressions and sensations. Underground, the experience is amplified by the knowledge that above lies weight and distance. We are enclosed not just by stone, but by the slow weight of Earth's age. The mind, sensing this, begins to drift. Some explorers describe it as a dreamlike state, where the passage of time loses its usual markers and instead seems to spiral, repeating and stretching. Caves are also homes to unusual records of life. Bones of extinct animals, sealed away from scavengers and weather, remain preserved in remarkable condition. The remains of cave bears, lions, and even early humans have been discovered in chambers untouched for tens of thousands of years. To find such remains is not simply to uncover history. It is to be confronted with how the underground chooses to keep what the surface discards. Above, the forces of erosion and decay quickly erase. Below, time is slowed enough that a trace of life can endure almost indefinitely. This slowing extends to the rocks themselves. In the depths of limestone caverns, formations known as speleothems grow in rhythm with changes above ground. Layers of calcite capture subtle shifts in rainfall, temperature, and even the chemistry of ancient atmospheres. To the trained eye, each band is a record, like the rings of a tree, storing a timeline that reaches back tens of thousands of years. When studied, these layers can reveal the story of vanished climates, droughts that reshaped landscapes, or floods that altered human migration. All this, stored quietly in the stillness below. What makes the underground compelling is not only its role as an archive, but the sense that it resists our measurement. Clocks tick, yet the cave does not acknowledge them. Instruments record, but the environment unfolds at its own tempo. Even the act of walking becomes different, with every step slowed to avoid slipping. With light limited to a narrow beam, a short distance can feel elongated. minutes stretch, an hour may feel like an age. By the time one emerges back into daylight, it is common to feel surprised at the actual passage of time. Consider also the role of crystals. In certain caves, enormous crystals form under rare and delicate conditions. The Cave of Crystals in Mexico, for example, holds some that are among the largest ever discovered, measuring tens of feet in length and weighing dozens of tons. These crystals took hundreds of thousands of years to grow, nurtured by waters saturated with minerals in chambers of nearly unbearable heat. To stand before them is to face structures older than civilization, older than humanity itself. In their presence, time becomes almost visible, embodied in transparent walls that required lifetimes beyond measure to form. Underground rivers offer another kind of lesson. Invisible from the surface, they carve out pathways and hollow chambers, sometimes creating entire networks that extend for hundreds of kilometers. Their flow is steady but unseen, shaping landscapes slowly and in silence. We know them only when they emerge again as springs or when explorers follow their dark routes. They remind us that beneath the visible timeline of the world, another is always unfolding, one that is hidden yet essential, constant yet almost imperceptible. For early humans, caves must have appeared as thresholds into this hidden time. To enter one was not only to seek shelter, but to step into a space where ordinary rhythms vanished. Here, a flame could last until its fuel was gone, but beyond its circle, there was only the vast and timeless dark. Here, voices echoed differently, carrying words into hollows where they seemed to linger longer than they should. To leave markings on the walls was to leave them in a place that felt closer to permanence. Perhaps this is why so many of the earliest known artworks were made in such places. They were created in the hope of surviving the erosion of the surface world. Archaeologists have found that these cave paintings often depict not only animals, but abstract symbols. Some patterns repeat across vast distances, suggesting a shared language of science. Though their meaning is still debated, their placement in the underground suggests something beyond mere decoration. It may be that the artists understood what we are still learning, that in such places, time itself behaves differently, and what is made there may last longer than the makers themselves. When we think of the underground, we often imagine confinement. Yet there is also vastness. Some caverns are so large they could hold entire cathedrals. In such spaces, the scale overwhelms. To stand in their hollow immensity, lit only by a flickering torch, is to feel both awe and insignificance. These chambers were not built by human hands, but by the steady work of water and pressure, repeated over spans of time too great to count. The immensity of the spaces suggests not confinement, but the grandeur of natural patience. What we sense, standing in such places, is not only geology, but the deep pulse of time itself. A pulse too slow for the surface world, too enduring for our clocks, too subtle for our calendars. Yet here, underground, it is present in every drop, every crystal, every silence. To linger long enough in that presence is to realize that time is not a single stream. It bends, it stretches, it compresses, depending on where we stand and how we listen. When we look at the surface of Earth, we often measure time by change. We notice the passing of seasons, the shifting of weather, the growth of plants, and the movement of animals. Underground, the markers are subtler. Lichens do not bloom here, trees do not drop their leaves, and winds do not sweep across open ground. The absence of surface rhythms forces us to consider time in slower, quieter ways. It becomes evident not through movement, but through the stillness that surrounds us. In the deepest caves, some of the oldest structures on Earth reside. There are mineral deposits that predate human history by orders of magnitude, formations that began before humanity itself emerged, and are still continuing their growth today. To realize that such growth continues, even as civilizations rise and collapse above, is to glimpse a scale that renders our histories into brief intervals. Each empire, each discovery, each war and peace becomes only a fraction of the time it takes for a crystal edge to sharpen. Even more remarkable is how life adapts to these different tempos. Microbial colonies thrive on the energy from minerals, forming mats and films that grow at astonishingly slow rates. These organisms may divide only once every few years, their life cycles elongated to match the environment around them. To a human observer, such slowness feels like stillness. Yet for the microbes, it is simply life at a different speed. They remind us that time is not universal. It is lived according to circumstance, shaped by necessity and survival. The study of such organisms has led some scientists to consider how life might exist in other worlds. If beneath the surface of Mars or Europa, there are environments shielded from harsh radiation and surface extremes, life could linger in slow, deliberate ways, much like it does in Earth's caves. Our own underground becomes a model for imagining survival beyond our planet. And again we find the theme repeating. Time, in such hidden places, moves differently, stretching into spans that far exceed human patience. It is striking, too, that the underground resists our technologies for measuring time. Mechanical devices can be carried into caves, of course, but their ticking feels out of place, their measurements arbitrary against the patient stone. Even electronic instruments, designed to record subtle changes, capture only fragments compared to what unfolds across centuries and millennia. In this sense, our science is humbled. The underground does not bend to our sense of urgency. It continues in its own register, leaving us to interpret what little we can. There is also the role of memory in rock itself. Layers deep beneath the surface carry records of magnetic reversals, times when Earth's magnetic field shifted and flipped. These reversals are etched into the orientation of minerals, frozen in place as lava cooled or sediment settled. They form a timeline far beyond human memory, allowing scientists to trace cycles that recur every few 100,000 years. To stand in such a chamber is to stand within a page of Earth's unwritten history, one that speaks not of days or centuries, but of epochs. Human beings have often turned to caves for storage, recognizing intuitively that what is placed underground may endure longer than on the surface. Archaeological finds reveal artifacts preserved in caves with astonishing clarity, textiles that would normally disintegrate in open air, seeds that would have spoiled, even footprints pressed into soft mud have survived beneath the protective roof of stone. Each discovery is a reminder that the underground bends the rules of decay, suspending time's ordinary pace and offering a glimpse into lives long gone. One cannot help but wonder how many other traces remain, sealed in dark chambers not yet explored. Entire records of ancient communities may lie beyond collapsed entrances or submerged passages, waiting quietly while centuries of surface life unfold above. If discovered, they would not simply expand our knowledge of history, they would remind us again that time underground does not pass in the same way. It waits, patient, until it is uncovered. The underground also challenges our sense of direction. Above, we orient ourselves by the movement of the sun, the position of stars, or the shifting of shadows. Below, such markers are absent. In their place, Orientation depends on the geometry of tunnels, the branching of passages, or the sound of running water. Without the external markers of time or space, the mind begins to drift inward, measuring only by heartbeat, breath, and step. Many explorers describe a dreamlike quality to such journeys, as though walking both through stone and through memory. This effect is magnified by the interplay of light and darkness. A single lantern or torch can transform a chamber into a universe of shadow. The flicker of flame makes walls seem to move, and shapes emerge that dissolve again in an instant. In such moments, time is experienced less as progression and more as suspension, a pause in which the mind drifts between perception and imagination. To ancient people, this quality must have felt otherworldly, reinforcing the sense that caves were thresholds into realms where human time no longer held sway. What emerges from all of this is a lesson not only about the underground, but about ourselves. We are accustomed to thinking of time as a constant, measurable and firm. Yet underground, constancy reveals itself in other forms. It shows us that stillness can carry as much meaning as motion, that patience can outlast even memory, and that survival often means slowing down to match the environment around us. To imagine time differently is to recognize that our familiar clocks are only one interpretation of its flow. Beneath the surface, we begin to see that time is not simply counted, but lived. Not a strict rhythm, but a range of tempos. It can race like a flood, pause like a sealed chamber, or creep as slowly as the mineral trace of a droplet turning into stone. The underground reveals to us that time is textured, varied, and layered, not the uniform stream we so often believe it to be. One of the most striking examples of this layered time is found in ice caves. Though technically part of the surface world, their entrances and chambers belong to the underground in their stillness and permanence. Within these caves, air bubbles remain trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, tiny capsules of ancient climates. When scientists drill and extract cores of ice, they are in effect opening a timeline of Earth's past atmospheres. Each bubble tells of different ages, levels of carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases reveal cycles of warming and cooling. In these frozen libraries, the pace of time is preserved in crystalline clarity. To hold such a sample is to touch a fragment of the past suspended in the present. Even more astonishing are lava tubes, long hollow corridors left behind by flowing magma. Many of these tunnels remain hidden beneath layers of cooled rock, some vast enough to stretch 4 miles. Their interiors, shielded from weather and change, can preserve delicate formations, collapsed ceilings, and traces of eruptions that took place tens of thousands of years ago. To walk through such a tube is to follow the course of molten fire long since extinguished. In such silence, the violence that once carved the tunnel seems almost impossible. Yet here it is, solidified into permanence, reminding us that what feels eternal underground was once the product of sudden, catastrophic change. The contrast between suddenness and slowness is one of the most powerful lessons the underground offers. On the surface, we see storms rise and pass in hours. Underground, we encounter structures born of catastrophes, but preserved in silence for millennia. A single eruption may last days, but the tunnel it leaves can remain unchanged for ages. A collapse may take only minutes, but the resulting cavern becomes part of the hidden landscape indefinitely. This tension teaches us that time is not always about the duration of an event, but about its entrance, the way its traces persist or vanish depending on where they fall. Our ancestors, even without modern instruments, must have sensed this distinction. They understood that certain places beneath the earth carried permanence, and they treated them as sacred. Burial sites placed in caves were not chosen only for protection from animals or the elements, but for their association with timelessness. To bury the dead in stone was to imagine them preserved, sheltered in a world where change moved more slowly. It was a gesture of respect, but also of hope that something essential could endure beyond the fragile span of life on the surface. Archaeological discoveries have borne this out. Skeletons, tools, and even pigments used for ritual have been found in such burial chambers, their preservation a testimony to the underground's patience. Some of the earliest ceremonial burials belong to the Neanderthals, who left their dead in caves, accompanied by items that suggest ritual intent. Whether they believed in an afterlife or simply honored their companions, their choice of caves indicates an understanding that underground time was different, a place where memory might outlast decay. The more we study these preserved remains, the more we realize how selective the underground is in what it keeps. For every artifact or skeleton discovered, countless others have been lost. What survives is not random, but filtered by the conditions of the environment. Dryness, darkness, instability favor preservation. Moisture, collapse, or intrusion accelerate decay. In this way, the underground teaches us another lesson. Time is not impartial. It does not treat all things equally. It is shaped by context, and survival depends on where one rests within its flow. This filtering has consequences for our understanding of history. Entire chapters of human existence may remain hidden or erased simply because they did not fall into the protective folds of stone. Civilizations that left their traces above ground may fade entirely, while those who left their marks underground are still visible. Our knowledge of the past is therefore not a complete story, but a selection offered by the patience of certain environments. This recognition humbles us. It reminds us that what we know is not all that was, but only what was allowed to remain. Consider, too, how the underground interacts with the human imagination. Myths across cultures speak of underworlds, places where souls travel after death, where secrets are kept, or where gods and spirits dwell. These myths may reflect not only symbolic ideas, but lived experiences of how caves warp time and perception. To enter such places was to feel a slowing of the ordinary world, to sense a vastness disconnected from daily rhythms. It is not difficult to imagine why ancient people associated such spaces with eternity or the beyond. In their silence and darkness, caves seemed to hold more than stone. They held a sense of time untethered from the human scale. Even today, when we descend into deep mines or natural caverns, the effect remains. Workers who spend weeks underground often describe losing track of days. Without sunrise or sunset, the calendar becomes abstract. Sleep cycles shift, and what matters most is the repetition of tasks rather than the passage of hours. In these settings, the mind adapts, creating its own rhythm divorced from the outside world. It is as if the body, sensing the weight and silence of stone, begins to measure time differently, aligning itself with the slower pulse of its surroundings. This adaptation can also be disorienting. Some researchers studying isolation in caves report feelings of timelessness so intense that individuals struggle to reconnect with surface life after re-emerging. Their sense of duration, altered by the underground, clashes with the fast pace of the world above. For them, minutes and hours no longer match the shared clock of society. It is a reminder that time, though often treated as objective, is deeply subjective, and the underground reveals just how fragile our shared measurement can be. What is perhaps most remarkable and how these underground lessons mirror cosmic ones. In the universe at large, time also bends and stretches. Near massive objects like black holes, time runs differently than in open space. Einstein's theories reveal that time is not a constant but relative, dependent on gravity and speed. In our caves and caverns, though on a smaller scale, we experience a similar truth. Time, even here on Earth, is not singular. It is multiple, layered, and varied. The underground gives us a way to feel this truth directly, not through equations, but through silence, darkness, and stone. The patience of stone is perhaps the clearest metaphor for this multiplicity. A cave wall has existed for millions of years. Its slow alterations are invisible to us, yet undeniable in the long view. To touch it is to place one's hand against an expanse of time too vast to comprehend. And in doing so, we are reminded of our own brevity. Our lives are sparks against this backdrop, moments in a continuum that stretches far beyond our capacity to measure. Yet this recognition is not despairing, it is grounding. To see ourselves against the scale of the underground is to find perspective, a reminder that our urgency is small compared to the steady entrance of Earth. This perspective can also inspire gratitude. For while we may be brief, our awareness allows us to witness these greater scales. We are capable of noticing the drip of water, the persistence of crystals, the silence of chambers untouched for millennia. We can imagine the patience required to build these spaces and respect the delicate conditions that preserve them. In doing so, we participate in the story of time, not as controllers, but as observers, humbled and enriched by the recognition that our role is fleeting yet meaningful. The underground, then, is not only a place of darkness, it is a teacher. It reminds us that time is not uniform, that survival depends on slowing down, that memory is selective, and that our histories are fragments offered by the patience of stone. It challenges us to see beyond the ticking of clocks and the turning of calendars, to recognize that beneath our feet lies a world where time itself follows different rules. And if we let ourselves dwell in that recognition, we begin to carry it with us even when we return to the surface. We notice the slowness in the growth of trees, the entrance of mountains, the persistence of rivers carving valleys. We see that the underground is not separate from us, but connected, part of a larger truth about how time flows on this planet. It is not one stream but many, braided together in patterns that shift depending on where we stand, how we live, and what we are willing to notice. This recognition leads us to reconsider our own relationship with time. If beneath the earth time feels different, then perhaps the same is true above ground, though we seldom notice it. The underground becomes a mirror for the hidden rhythms of our own lives. Just as caves preserve or erase depending on conditions, so too do our minds. Some memories remain vivid for decades, while others fade almost instantly. The persistence of stone and the fragility of recollection both remind us that time is uneven, selective, and layered. Archaeologists have long marveled at how certain objects survive against expectation. A clay vessel may remain intact for millennia if buried in a protective layer of soil, while more fragile objects, like wood or textiles, may vanish entirely. What endures is not always what was most important to those who created it, but what happened to fall into a context that favored preservation. In this sense, the underground edits history. It chooses, in its quiet way, what the future will know. When we explore such spaces, we are not seeing a full picture, but a curated one, shaped by the peculiar patience of stone. Consider the case of painted caves in Europe, like Lascaux or Chauvet. Their walls bear images of animals drawn tens of thousands of years ago, preserved because they lay hidden in darkness. For generations, they were unseen by human eyes, waiting in silence until rediscovery. The artists who made them could not have known that their work would one day survive longer than entire empires. The underground made this possible. The pigments, shielded from sunlight and weather, remained as vivid as the day they were applied. Here, time is not only slowed, but folded, connecting the hand of the ancient artist with the gaze of the modern viewer. To stand before such paintings is to feel the collapsing of ages, as if the underground itself has orchestrated a meeting across thousands of years. This capacity of caves to carry art through time invites reflection on creativity itself. Perhaps the act of painting underground was more than practical shelter from weather. Perhaps the artist sensed that these walls were different, that the depths offered a permanence unavailable above ground. By choosing to paint here, they extended their voices beyond the ordinary span of life. In doing so, they aligned themselves with the patience of stone. Art became a bridge, not only between people, but between eras, preserved because it was entrusted to the underground's slower rhythm. Yet alongside preservation, we must also acknowledge loss. For every cave painting discovered, countless others have been destroyed by collapse, water, or human intrusion. The underground's generosity is balanced by its fragility. Once disturbed, its delicate conditions can change dramatically. Even the breath of visitors, the warmth of lights, or the introduction of new microbes can alter a cave's equilibrium, causing paintings to fade or mold to grow. Thus, the underground's gift of preservation is not unconditional. It requires respect and restraint. To treat it carelessly is to disrupt the very slowness that allows memory to endure. This awareness deepens the mystery of underground time. It is both patient and precarious, capable of stretching across millennia, but vulnerable to a single careless touch. It reminds us that time's flow is not just about duration, but about balance. Too much disturbance, and the thread is broken. Too much exposure, and what endured for ages vanishes almost overnight. We are called, then, to humility, recognizing that our presence can hasten decay as easily as it can discover beauty. Moving beyond art and artifacts, the underground also holds biological time in fascinating ways. In caves isolated from sunlight, unique ecosystems thrive. Species evolve in complete darkness, losing pigmentation and eyesight, adapting to conditions that remain stable for millions of years. Blind fish, pale insects, and delicate fungi all belong to this slow world. Their existence testifies to how life can align itself with a different tempo of time. Instead of racing to adapt to changing environments, they embody constancy, shaped by stillness rather than turbulence. For scientists, these species are windows into evolutionary time on scales rarely visible elsewhere. They demonstrate how isolation and stability produce life forms finely tuned to their environment. Some of these species are considered living fossils, almost unchanged for vast stretches of history. Observing them is like looking into a mirror of Earth's distant past, as if the underground has kept not only artifacts, but living examples of earlier ages. Here again, we see that time does not move uniformly. In one place, it accelerates. In another, it holds still. And just as life slows in caves, so too does decay. Bacteria and fungi that normally decompose organic matter are less active in certain underground conditions. As a result, remains can be preserved far longer than on the surface. Bodies left in dry caves, for instance, may mummify naturally, their features remaining recognizable centuries later. This eerie preservation has been discovered across cultures, from the Andes to the Middle East. Each time, the underground reveals its power to slow time, only for stone, but for flesh. These mummies, though often startling to encounter, are not merely curiosities. They reveal a truth about the fragility of life and the resilience of form. They show how different environments shape the journey from life to dust. In some places, decomposition is swift. In others, it lingers, suspending the body between presence and absence. For those who buried their dead in caves, this must have carried profound spiritual weight. To see the features of ancestors endure so long was perhaps a confirmation that the underground offered a gateway to continuity, a place where death was not immediate disappearance, but a gradual, almost reverent transition. Beyond biology and burial, the underground also influences human experience of time through architecture. Tunnels, catacombs, and subterranean sanctuaries built by ancient civilizations reveal deliberate engagement with these altered rhythms. The builders seemed to understand that to descend was to step outside ordinary time. Many of these spaces were dedicated to ritual, meditation, or burial, activities deeply concerned with duration, memory, and continuity. In creating such spaces, people align themselves with the underground's slower tempo, seeking to borrow its entrance for their own purposes. Even in modern times, underground structures reflect this desire. From subway systems to data centers carved into bedrock, we continue to use the underground for functions that demand stability and security. Servers storing vast amounts of digital memory are often placed in subterranean vaults, where temperature and conditions can be carefully controlled. In this sense, our technology follows the same instinct as our ancestors. We entrust what we most wish to preserve, whether bones, art, or data, to the patience of stone. The parallel is striking. Just as cave paintings survive tens of thousands of years in darkness, so too might our digital records endure, if shielded from surface hazards. In both cases, the underground becomes a partner in preservation, offering a slower, steadier context in which memory can persist. Yet the question remains, what of this preservation will actually last? Even the most carefully constructed vaults are subject to eventual decay, collapse, or intrusion. Once again, the underground reminds us of humility. Its slowness is powerful, but not eternal. Time, even here, continues its quiet work. What emerges from all these reflections is a vision of the underground as a realm where time's multiplicity is most visible. It is a place where memory is preserved or lost depending on delicate conditions, where life adapts to slowness, where rituals seek continuity, and where human projects attempt to borrow the entrance of stone. In its silence and darkness, the underground reveals truths about time that we often overlook above ground. But perhaps the most profound lesson is not about preservation, decay, or biology, but about perspective. To descend is to be reminded of scale. The weight of rock above, the patience of formations, the survival of paintings and mummies all point to a reality in which our ordinary measures of hours and days are insufficient. The underground asks us to think in centuries, in millennia, in epochs. It urges us to widen our sense of time beyond the brevity of our own lives, to recognize ourselves as part of a continuum, both ancient and ongoing. And in that recognition, there is a kind of peace, for though our lives are fleeting, they are part of a tapestry woven through countless layers of time. To walk in a cave, to see paintings or fossils or crystals, is to feel connected to that tapestry. It is to realize that time, though uneven, binds us all to those who came before, to those who will come after, and to the patient stone that endures long beyond us. If we let our minds linger on this tapestry of time, we begin to notice how the underground does not only stretch the hours and centuries, but also bends our sense of direction. Above ground we orient ourselves by the movement of the sun, by shadows that lengthen and shorten, by the rhythm of day and night. Underground, all of that vanishes. There is no sunrise to mark the beginning of a new day, no sunset to bring closure. Instead, time becomes circular, looping in ways that feel unfamiliar to us. Explorers who spend long stretches in caves often speak of losing track not only of hours, but of the order of events. Did they eat before or after they slept? Was this silence from today or from yesterday? Without the sky as guide, memory itself begins to drift. Psychologists who study such experiences note that underground environments seem to weaken what we call temporal anchors, the mental cues we use to situate ourselves in time. Without these anchors, our minds construct different rhythms, sometimes inventing their own cycles, sometimes collapsing entirely into a continuous present. It is as if the cave whispers that there is no past or future, only this moment, unfolding slowly, patiently, without haste. This shift is not only disorienting, it can be deeply calming, a suspension of urgency. For many, this altered perception feels like a gift, though it can also stir unease in those accustomed to constant movement and measurement. The history of spiritual traditions echoes this experience. Monks, hermits, and seekers across cultures have descended into caves not only for shelter, but for transformation. By removing themselves from the cycles of sun and season, they place themselves in a realm where time could be contemplated differently. In the stillness of underground chambers, they prayed, meditated, and listened. Accounts of such retreats often describe visions, revelations, or an overwhelming sense of timelessness. Perhaps these were not illusions, but genuine encounters with the altered flow of perception in such environments. The cave became both sanctuary and teacher, showing what it means to step outside ordinary rhythms. From a scientific point of view, these shifts remind us of the relativity of time as experienced by consciousness. We measure time with clocks and calendars, yet our minds register it subjectively. Minutes can feel like hours in moments of fear, while days can vanish unnoticed in states of deep absorption. Underground, where external cues vanish, this subjectivity becomes even more pronounced. We are left to face time not as a rigid sequence, but as a fluid perception. In this way, caves are natural laboratories for exploring the psychology of duration, revealing how much of what we call time is constructed by the interplay of body, environment, and mind. But beyond perception, the underground also reveals time through matter itself. Rocks hold records of ages in their very structure. Layers of sediment, bands of minerals, and shapes of crystals all testify to processes that unfold across unimaginable spans. A stalactite does not grow in years or decades, but in millennia, each drop of water adding a fraction of a millimeter. To stand in such a chamber is to witness an archive written slowly, almost imperceptibly, across the ceiling and floor. Here, the difference between 100 years and 1,000 may be invisible to the eye. The underground reminds us that time's scale is vast, and that what feels endless to us may be a mere instant in geological terms. Geologists often describe caves as time machines, not in the sense of transporting us elsewhere, but in the way they allow us to read backward. Isotope ratios in stalagmites reveal ancient climates. Layers of mineral deposits trace cycles of wet and dry seasons over tens of thousands of years. By sampling such features, scientists reconstruct histories that far exceed human memory. In a sense, the cave speaks in a language of stone, each layer a sentence, each band a paragraph, recording the dialogue between earth and sky, water and air. When we learn to read it, we find ourselves immersed in chronicles that stretch beyond imagination. These chronicles hold both beauty and warning. They reveal periods of abundance, when rainfall carved fertile valleys, and periods of drought that challenged survival. They speak of shifts in temperature and atmosphere that echo patterns we recognize today. By studying them, we gain perspective on our present, realizing that climate is never static, that change is woven into the planet's story. Yet they also remind us of fragility, for civilizations have risen and fallen in response to such shifts. What feels eternal may be altered in a single century, even as stone records the evidence for those who come after. The interplay of human life and underground time becomes clear in such moments. Our ancestors may not have understood isotopes or mineralogy, but they sensed the permanence of caves. They left paintings, carvings, and offerings in places where they believed time itself slowed. For them, the underground was not merely shelter, but continuity, a place where memory might endure beyond a single life. This intuition, though expressed in myth and ritual, aligns with what we now know scientifically, that caves are indeed places where the past can persist. Their patience becomes a partner to ours, their silence a companion in the long arc of history. At the same time, the underground reveals the limits of entrance. Caves collapse, water erodes, minerals dissolve. Just as life slows decay here, so too does the earth eventually reclaim what lies within. Nothing is beyond time's reach, though in these depths its touch is delayed. This duality, persistence and impermanence, captures the essence of underground time. It is not escape, but extension, not eternity, but postponement. To descend is to step into a space where endings are deferred, but never cancelled. In this recognition lies a subtle lesson for us. Our own efforts to preserve, to remember, to endure are not futile, but are framed by limits. We may entrust memory to stone, to digital vaults, to underground chambers, but eventually the cycle continues. What matters is not the illusion of permanence, but the acknowledgement of continuity. Just as stalagmites grow drop by drop, so too do our actions accumulate. Each gesture, each word, each creation is a contribution to the ongoing story. Whether preserved for millennia or forgotten within a generation, they are part of the fabric of time. The underground thus becomes a metaphor for living with patience. It teaches that change is slow, that memory is fragile, that presence is powerful. It reminds us that our perspective is narrow, yet we are capable of glimpsing scales far beyond ourselves. To walk in a cave, to see its formations, to feel its silence, is to practice humility before time. We are small, yet we are also participants in a story as vast as the earth itself. And perhaps that is the quiet gift of considering whether time moves differently underground. It is not about proving a literal difference in seconds or minutes, but about realizing the richness of perspective. In these depths we discover how varied and complex time truly is. We see how perception, preservation, biology, and geology each shape its flow. We glimpse the ways in which memory endures and dissolves, how patience carves beauty, and how silence holds meaning. Most of all, we feel ourselves woven into that fabric, connected by stone to those who came before, and to those who will follow. To sit with these thoughts is to feel the underground not as a separate place, but as a continuation of the world above. The difference is not in kind, but in degree. Above ground, time moves with the rush of wind, the growth of trees, the passing of clouds. Below ground, it moves with the drip of water, the settling of minerals, the silence of stone. Both are part of the same planet, yet they invite us to notice different scales. The underground emphasizes slowness, asking us to stretch our awareness beyond the urgency of a single day. When researchers lower instruments into deep boreholes, they are not simply gathering data. They are listening to the Earth's long memory. Tiny changes in temperature, pressure, and seismic vibration are written like lines in a diary that stretches back millions of years. In these records, we see cycles of ice and warmth, of drought and flood. The underground has been keeping track all along, indifferent to whether we read its story or not. And in these stories, we discover echoes of our present. Climate patterns that trouble us now are variations on rhythms that have unfolded many times before. To read the stone is to realize that the Earth remembers more than we do. The study of paleomagnetism offers another example. As molten rock cools, the magnetic orientation of minerals locks in place, recording the direction of the Earth's magnetic field at that moment. Layer upon layer of such records, buried deep within caves or cliffs, reveals a history of reversals stretching back hundreds of millions of years. The underground carries this record silently, waiting until we learn to recognize it. These reversals remind us that even forces we think of as permanent are subject to change. Time, again, proves itself not linear, but layered, holding within it both continuity and transformation. In this way, the underground becomes not only an archive, but also a teacher of patience. It shows that what seems immutable may one day shift. Mountains erode, rivers carve, fields of lava harden, then crumble. Even the magnetic field flips its polarity, rewriting what north and south mean. All of these changes are invisible to a single human life. Yet in the underground, the traces remain. By learning to see them, we expand our sense of belonging. We realize that we live not in a moment apart, but in a chapter of a vast story still being written. One might wonder, then, what the underground will remember of us. Will it keep fragments of our cities, compressed into stone by future pressures? Will traces of our industries leave chemical signatures that linger in sediments? Scientists already speak of the Anthropocene, an era defined by human impact. In future rock layers, plastic residues, nuclear isotopes, and altered carbon levels will bear witness to our presence. In this sense, the underground is already recording us. Whether we wish it to or not, it is adding our chapter to its archive. The thought can be sobering. Unlike a cave painting hidden in darkness, many of our contributions are pollutants, unintended legacies of activity. Yet even these are part of the story. They remind us that time is not passive. It carries forward what we place into it. The underground cannot choose what it preserves. It holds what falls to it, whether beauty or waste. To recognize this is to confront our responsibility. We are authors in this vast chronicle, and our choices today will echo in the patience of stone tomorrow. And yet, not all is warning. There is also grace in knowing that the underground remembers us. For just as it holds our eras, it may also hold our art, our aspirations, our attempts at meaning. Future beings may one day uncover remnants of music etched into stone, words carved into walls, or structures hidden beneath collapsed earth. In these, they may sense our longing, our creativity, our desire to reach across time, the underground does not discriminate. It will hold what we leave, offering it to whoever comes after, just as it has delivered fossils, paintings, and minerals to us. This awareness changes how we see our own moment. Instead of thinking of time as something that slips away, we begin to see it as something layered. Each action, no matter how small, leaves a trace. Just as stalactites grow from single drops, so too does the archive of the future grow from each of our choices. We are part of a process larger than ourselves, and the underground offers us a reminder of this continuity. In contemplating these layers, it becomes clear that time underground is not simply slower, but also deeper. It carries with it dimensions of memory that stretch far beyond human reckoning. To stand in a cave is to stand within this depth, surrounded by walls that have seen millions of years pass without rush. The silence presses upon us, not as emptiness, but as fullness, thick with stories we have yet to understand. Each stone, each mineral vein, each fossil is a chapter in this silent library, and as we read, we become aware of our own fleeting presence within it. This humility can shift how we live above ground. Instead of rushing through days as though they vanish, we begin to sense that they, too, accumulate. Our moments are not lost but layered, part of the same fabric that forms stalagmites and fossil beds. The underground becomes a metaphor for the way all time works. Even on the surface, it is not gone, but folded into the whole. The present is always becoming part of the past, preserved in ways we cannot yet see. To dwell on this is to feel gratitude. For while we may not control how we are remembered, we are granted the chance to contribute to the tapestry. The underground shows us that memory is possible, that entrance exists, that beauty can cross thousands of years. We are invited to add our voices thoughtfully, knowing that what we do matters not only for ourselves, but for the shape of time to come. Perhaps this is why caves and tunnels stir such wonder in us. It is not only the darkness or the mystery, but the recognition of time's immensity. We feel small, yet also connected. We realize that our lives, though brief, participate in patterns stretching across eons. To walk underground is to walk through history written by human hands alone, but by water, mineral, and silence. It is to encounter time not as abstraction, but as presence, surrounding us in stone. And when we return to the surface, blinking in sunlight, we carry this awareness with us. The sky feels brighter, the air more alive, the passing clouds more significant. We notice how shadows lengthen, how leaves fall, how rivers move. Above ground, time regains its speed, yet we carry with us the memory of slowness. The underground teaches us to see differently, to measure our days, not only by clocks, but by the deeper rhythms of patience and continuity. The deeper we travel, the more we realize that the underground is not merely a repository of the past, but a space in which time itself acquires texture. Here, moments are not uniform ticks, but layers, each one shaped by environment, pressure, and circumstance. The flow is slow, almost imperceptible, yet unstoppable. Minerals crystallize drop by drop. Stalagmites rise millimeter by millimeter. Sediments settle imperceptibly. And in these motions, which escape the awareness of the daily human eye, we encounter a different rhythm, one that challenges our habitual sense of urgency. This rhythm influences perception as much as preservation. Explorers and scientists who spend extended periods underground describe a sense of timelessness, so profound that the surface world seems to belong to another reality entirely. Without the sun, without wind or rain, without the cues of day and night, the mind adjusts. Sleep schedules blur, thoughts lengthen, the boundary between now and the past becomes ambiguous. Time, in these circumstances, is not a measure, but an experience, tangible in the echo of footfalls, the dripping of water, and the weight of stone pressing silently from above. Caves that have remained untouched for millennia illustrate this beautifully. Each wall, each ceiling, each formation holds evidence of processes ongoing long before humans arrived. The slow flow of water over limestone creates channels and grooves that take tens of thousands of years to form. Tiny fluctuations in mineral content, temperature, and humidity leave subtle marks that accumulate imperceptibly. In these spaces, we see that time is both patient and relentless. It is shaping the earth continuously, even when unobserved, reminding us that change is constant yet often invisible. This understanding shifts how we interpret human artifacts discovered underground. Tools, pigments, bones, and structures are not simply relics. They are interruptions within a far longer narrative. A handprint on a cave wall, while seemingly instantaneous, becomes part of a continuum that began long before and will continue long after. In the same vein, fossils embedded in sedimentary layers reveal organisms that lived millions of years ago, frozen in the slow march of geological processes. Both demonstrate how the underground offers a unique temporal perspective, one in which human lifespan is but a momentary pause in a far broader sequence. Moreover, the underground teaches patience in observation. Whereas above ground, we often seek immediate results, underground discovery requires slow attention. Archaeologists and speleologists move carefully, mindful that a single misstep can destroy what took centuries or millennia to form. This patience is not merely practical, but philosophical. The underground asks us to slow our pace, to accept that understanding is incremental. Knowledge emerges not through haste, but through sustained, careful attention, a reminder that time and effort are intertwined. In addition, the underground presents a lens for considering permanence and fragility simultaneously. While some formations endure for millions of years, others are delicate, easily altered by minor shifts in temperature or moisture. Similarly, human remains or artifacts can survive under optimal conditions or be obliterated in a moment. This duality shapes our understanding of history itself. What endures is not always what is significant, and what disappears is not necessarily unimportant. The underground is impartial. It preserves some stories and erases others, leaving gaps that challenge our understanding and invite speculation. The multiplicity of time underground also affects life itself. Certain species, entirely blind and depigmented, have adapted to constant darkness. Their metabolism, behavior, and reproductive cycles follow a tempo dictated not by the sun, but by the subtle cues of the subterranean world. In this sense, the underground is a natural laboratory for alternative biological rhythms. Organisms that thrive in these environments remind us that life is flexible, capable of attuning itself to different measures of time. Evolution, too, moves differently depending on conditions, sometimes rapid, sometimes glacially slow, and the underground is a witness to both. Even microorganisms, invisible to the eye, adhere to these slow patterns. Biofilms and mineral interactions accumulate over centuries, recording minute changes in chemistry and temperature. These interactions influence cave ecosystems and the preservation of fossils or artifacts. It is astonishing to consider that the smallest life forms are themselves chroniclers of time, shaping and recording processes beyond our direct observation. In this way, the underground merges the biological, geological, and human perspectives, presenting a continuum in which all forms of duration intersect. Human culture has long been drawn to this perception of slow time. Cave paintings, engravings, and ceremonial spaces reflect an awareness that the underground possesses its own rhythm. Ancient societies deliberately sought it out, whether for ritual, burial, or art, sensing that these spaces offered a permanence unattainable above ground. By placing significant objects and practices in subterranean contexts, early humans aligned their ephemeral lives with the enduring processes of the earth. They recognized, consciously or intuitively, that time below the surface operated on a scale far beyond their individual span. The lessons extend to contemporary experiences as well. Scientists in long-term underground research facilities report altered perceptions of duration, often noting that weeks can pass without feeling measured by hours or days. In these conditions, work becomes rhythmical rather than timed, guided by environmental cues rather than clocks. This experience mirrors the natural underground world itself, in which processes advance silently, steadily, independent of human attention. Our modern interventions, whether mining or constructing subterranean labs, cannot escape this influence. Time, here, asserts itself on its own terms. Even more, the underground allows us to observe the interaction between stability and change. Stalactites, stalagmites, and flowstones grow with imperceptible slowness, yet caves can also experience sudden shifts, collapses, floods, or volcanic activity. These events remind us that change is always present, even where continuity seems absolute. Life, culture, and memory are preserved in delicate balance, vulnerable to forces beyond control. The underground teaches us humility. Its entrance is remarkable, yet it is not invincible. Finally, the underground presents a profound metaphor for reflection. By stepping into spaces where time moves differently, we are invited to reconsider our priorities, our perception of duration, and the meaning of persistence. We learn that some achievements are fleeting while others may endure far longer than expected. We see the interplay of stability and fragility, of slow accumulation and sudden transformation. And in this space, our human sense of urgency softens, replaced by an awareness of continuity, depth, and patience. To leave the underground and return to the surface is not simply a physical movement, it is a shift in consciousness. We carry with us an understanding that time is more than the minutes and hours of a clock. We sense its textures, its layers, its rhythms, and its patience. We realize that every choice, every creation, every moment of attention contributes to a larger story, one written not only by humans, but by the enduring processes of the earth itself. The underground has taught us that time is not a single stream, but a manifold in which duration, preservation, and perception intertwine endlessly. Descending deeper into the underground, we find ourselves in a realm where human measures of time become almost irrelevant. The slow accretion of mineral deposits, the imperceptible drip of water, and the subtle growth of subterranean life demonstrate that the world moves according to rhythms far older and more patient than our own. Here, minutes and hours yield to centuries and millennia, and in that surrender, we begin to see the fragility and persistence of our own actions. Every step, every word, every gesture leaves a trace, whether physical or ephemeral, in a continuum that stretches beyond our perception. It is in these depths that we begin to understand the duality of preservation and impermanence. Some formations endure for millions of years, remaining almost unchanged, while others collapse or erode with surprising swiftness. The underground holds the past with both generosity and impartiality, offering a record of what has happened, while allowing countless other stories to disappear. This balance teaches humility, reminding us that nothing lasts forever, and that entrance is often contingent on conditions beyond our control. Yet within this uncertainty, there is profound beauty. The very fragility of these spaces makes their continuity remarkable. We can extend this insight to the broader human experience. Just as caves preserve ancient art, fossils, and minerals, so too do the decisions, relationships, and cultures we cultivate leave traces. Some may endure visibly, others subtly, while countless others vanish unnoticed. Yet all contribute to the texture of history. The underground becomes a metaphor for this temporal complexity. It demonstrates that what we consider fleeting may resonate far longer than expected, while what we deem permanent may crumble quickly. To witness this is to engage in a meditation on causality, patience, and perspective. In caves where early humans painted, carved, and performed rituals, we see a deliberate attempt to communicate across generations. These actions were taken in spaces where time's slowness was palpable, where the very walls bore witness to centuries of geological and climatic changes. By engaging with these spaces, our ancestors participated in a dialogue with time itself. They entrusted their stories to a medium that would outlast their individual lives, hoping, consciously or intuitively, that future observers might glimpse a fragment of their consciousness. The underground, in this way, is both partner and silent guardian of memory. This enduring presence extends beyond artifacts. Life itself thrives under conditions where time behaves differently. Blind fish, pale crustaceans, and fungi adapted to darkness exemplify evolutionary rhythms that contrast sharply with those above ground. Their slow development and longevity in stable environments reveal the myriad ways that life responds to subtle temporal shifts. Observing these species offers lessons not only in adaptation, but in the patience inherent to natural processes. The underground teaches that duration is relative, and that survival often depends on aligning with the tempo of one's surroundings rather than resisting it. Moreover, the underground provides insights into the climate and geological cycles that shape the world. Sediment layers, mineral veins, and isotopic compositions offer a record of rainfall patterns, temperature fluctuations, and atmospheric changes over tens of thousands, even millions of years. Each formation is a chronicle, silently recording the interplay of natural forces. By interpreting these records, scientists reconstruct past environments, gaining perspective on the fragility of life and the constancy of change. The subterranean realm becomes a lens through which we can observe both history and possibility. And yet, despite this immense scale, human experience continues to matter. Modern explorers, scientists, and even casual visitors engage with subterranean spaces in ways that subtly influence their character. By moving slowly, observing carefully, and respecting delicate ecosystems, they participate in a dialogue with time. Each careful step echoes the same reverence shown by those who came before, those who painted, carved, and buried offerings in darkness. In these spaces, we are reminded that humility and patience are forms of knowledge, and that understanding the past requires attunement to processes far larger than ourselves. The underground also offers lessons in perception and psychology. Without sunlight or surface cues, our sense of duration shifts. Hours can stretch into what feels like days, and the boundaries between past and present blur. Researchers studying prolonged underground habitation report altered sleep cycles, changes in mood, and heightened sensitivity to subtle environmental cues. These effects remind us that time is not merely external, but constructed by consciousness. In the quiet of the cave, we sense its variability. We become aware of how our minds, bodies, and surroundings interact to create the sensation of temporality, and how easily that perception can be shifted. We also learn from the delicate balance between continuity and disruption. Just as stalactites can form over millennia, yet can collapse in an instant, so too can human and ecological systems endure or vanish with little warning. The underground teaches respect for stability and an understanding of fragility. In observing these processes, we are reminded that what endures is not guaranteed, and that intervention can either preserve or destroy. Every action, whether in the natural or human world, carries consequences that ripple across time, even if imperceptibly. By integrating these lessons, we gain a richer perspective on our place in the world. Life above ground is fleeting in comparison to geological processes, yet it is meaningful because it interacts with enduring systems. Culture, technology, and knowledge are layered upon the slower rhythms of earth, water, and stone. The underground demonstrates that our actions are not isolated. They participate in a continuum far beyond daily perception. Awareness of this relationship fosters reverence, mindfulness, and the recognition of the stakes inherent in creation, preservation, and stewardship. Perhaps most profoundly, the underground reveals that time itself is layered and multidimensional. Moments accumulate, some preserved, some lost, forming a mosaic of experiences that spans eras. The slow movement of mineral and water, the adaptations of subterranean life, the careful placement of human art and artifacts, all these reflect different temporalities converging in a single environment. By observing and contemplating this convergence, we develop an appreciation for the subtle, patient processes that shape existence. The underground, in its silence and darkness, becomes a teacher of endurance, attentiveness, and humility. As we emerge from these depths, blinking in daylight, we carry with us a new perception of time. The sun's path feels both immediate and part of something vast. The cycles of growth and decay, activity and rest, take on dimensions beyond mere hours or days. We notice small details with greater awareness: the sway of trees, the ripple of water, the shadow of clouds. Life above ground continues at its familiar pace, yet we are attuned to the slower, hidden rhythms beneath our feet. The lessons of the underground persist, shaping how we think, act, and perceive. And so, as this journey through subterranean time concludes, we recognize a simple but profound truth: the underground offers a window into both endurance and transience. It shows that life, memory, and matter all follow different rhythms, and that understanding these rhythms requires patience, attentiveness, and humility. It encourages us to think beyond the immediate, to consider the long arc of time, and to honor the interplay between permanence and impermanence. In this recognition, we find a quiet sense of connection to the vast continuum of existence. Before we conclude, if you have found yourself drawn into this meditation on time and the underground, there is a simple invitation to pause, to notice, and to carry this sense of depth into your own life. Look for the slow currents around you, whether in nature, in relationships, or in your own thoughts. Recognize that even the smallest actions contribute to the continuum of time, and that patience and presence are themselves forms of preservation. By attending to these subtleties, You participate in the quiet, enduring story that the underground has been recording for millennia. And with that, we can rest, let the echoes of stone and the weight of centuries settle around your mind. Let the rhythm of drip and mineral, of patient growth and quiet decay, guide your thoughts towards stillness. The underground has shown us a perspective both humbling and expansive. May that awareness accompany you into sleep, into dreams, and into the coming days. Thank you for sharing this journey into the hidden dimensions of time.